Okay, everybody, so this is my review of The Handmaid's Tale Season 4, Episode 5, Chicago. This is directed by the same director from last episode, Christina Cho. This is written by John Herrera and Nina Fiore. So with this review, we'll break it down to two parts. I'll start with the Nick, Lawrence, and Lydia storylines, and then we'll finish off with June and Janine. So I absolutely loved this first scene with Aunt Lydia. It might actually be my favorite scene of the episode, because it has great setup in one scene with payoff in that same scene. And what I'm talking about is that we see inside these aunts hanging out, which we don't get enough to see, right? We never really see their whole situation, what they're doing day to day, but you see they're drinking tea, they are playing chess, and they're playing cards, and they're doing this religious puzzle. Of course, it's a picture of Mary with all these female angels around her, looking up to her. Of course, this is what aunts aspire to be. But what I'm talking about with setup and payoff, I love how they had the aunt say to Aunt Lydia while she's on the treadmill, do you want us to deal you in? And she's like, no thanks. She's more focused on getting back to work and now seeing these new handmaids come in. And I'll explain the payoff in a minute. But what's interesting is this character of Aunt Ruth coming in, who's a towering Aunt Ruth. She's a tall person, and it works really well because it's making Aunt Lydia look weak. And you see how the camera work here is purposely pointing down at Aunt Lydia, most of the scenes here. I love the shot here of Aunt Ruth looking down at Aunt Lydia. It reminds me of Serena Joy looking down at June, just that towering presence. But you see she's informing Lydia they're going to replace the lost children in no time with these new handmaids. But Lydia, isn't right away sent to go take care of those handmaids. She has to be reinstated first. And it's heartbreaking to her because Ruth's like, those girls are not your concern anymore. And even when Lydia's pleading to Ruth, like, can you just speak to the commanders on my behalf to have me reinstated? Ruth just doesn't care. And she's like, it's your time to rest. But that payoff I'm talking about is right here when Ruth points to the table where they invite her to play before. And she's like, oh, good, there's an empty seat at the table. Godspeed. Just trying to put Lydia where she does not want to be, playing cards with other aunts. She wants to do her work. So I thought that was just brilliantly laid out and how you really do a scene well. Now we see Commander Lawrence speaking to the council, and Nick is on that council. And what frustrates me a bit is I'm happy that we finally got clear how much he actually knew about Lawrence here and his involvement with June, which I don't think was made clear enough earlier in the season. And it added to confusion, like I had complained about, like, how did Nick get him off so easy without him being put on the wall? But you learn this episode that really Lydia knows his involvement, but they don't know to the extent of how much stuff Lawrence did this council. So now we see that here. But I just wish we had known that earlier. It was a little confusing. But what Lawrence is doing here is he's proposing a ceasefire on contested borders. And he's saying this is in Chicago, California, and Texas. And he's saying it's the moral high ground to take to ease the trade restrictions. But really, at the end of the day, he's doing this for June. And I like his line where he's like, we can just hit him harder in Nevada, when he's trying to justify these guys that are war hungry. And he's trying to sell it where he's like, unlike woman, numbers don't lie. I thought this was just some really good humorous writing for Lawrence. But you see the council rejects this proposal, and Nick has to save face, also rejects it. But he's like to Lawrence, I can't vote ceasefire on a charge I'm leading. But you see this sets up now, Lawrence and Nick have this weird tension between them where they're helping each other, but at the same time, they're testing each other and pushing each other and kind of trying to get a leg up on each other. How many times is this guy going to say each other? But Lawrence is explaining to Nick, if we do this ceasefire, it will help June. But Nick's like, I would know if June is at one of these borders. But Lawrence says it's a big country, Commander. The eyes can't see everything. Again, giving Nick that shove he really needs because he always gets cold feet and hesitates. So what I did love is when we go back to Lydia, that we see her looking at her reflection in the mirror, and there's two Lydias there, right? And it's showing that duality of her character, that internal conflict she has. We all have this. We're all dual in a sense, right? And two sides of our head battling. But Lydia's a really complicated character, and what's interesting about her struggle is that, to me, she really isn't likable at all. I don't give her any redemption here. I think that's long gone, but that's me. But she's that case of someone who has a belief in it, in this system of Gilead, and we'll see later, she says this in her speech to her new handmaids, but, doesn't like the stuff that goes on behind the scenes with what men do to these handmaids. And she's always kind of been enabling of that by turning a blind eye, even though she doesn't like it. The reason I'm bringing this up right now, though, is I don't know how we can get to redemption for her. I mean, she's done so much wrong, and she still believes in the Gilead system, which is still rape. These ceremonies are rape that she's still supporting. So I don't know how we can pull this off, is what I'm saying. But we get this verbal ping pong now between Lydia and Lawrence, and she blackmails him, basically saying all this dirt she knows about him. But they're trying to get out what they need from each other, and what he needs is to get put on the council again. She can help him with that by giving him blackmail on the other commanders, but she wants to get reinstated as an aunt. But she also gets in the deal that she will have June at the end of the day and do what she wants with her. You know Lawrence doesn't want this, but he's clearly saying yes here to get what he needs. But that's going to be an interesting conflict later on when that comes up, and I'm sure that's really setting up Lawrence's final redemption at the end of the day by protecting June from Lydia. But we see here Nick meets with these two Marthas that are part of Mayday, and it's like good cop, bad cop here. One of them's like, June's got all these people killed. You know, you should just forget about her. You'd be better off. This really is like, again, two sides of Reddit, these two Marthas. And the other one's like nice about it, and she's telling him where June is, saying that she heard there's two handmaids near the border of Chicago. So this now confirms to Nick, oh my God, like June is at this border that Lawrence is trying to cease fire. So Lydia now is reinstated, right? She's putting her baton back on. She puts the pin on. I really like the scene with her new handmaids here. But you see, she's saying stuff that she didn't really say in the beginning of her career as an aunt, where she's like, you'll be tested by wicked men, and they will try to lead you astray. And when they do, I will be here to listen. But like I said before, this is Lydia in a nutshell. This is her character. She believes in these religious ways of Gilead and their practices, but doesn't believe in the stuff that is actually hypocritical that they do behind the scenes. So we'll see where they go with Lydia's story like that. Again, I think it's just going to be hard to sell her redemption arc if she is still okay with the ceremonies they have to have these handmaids get pregnant. That's my one concern. How do you sell that and get us on board as the audience? So Lawrence is back on the council here. All seems like it's going to plan and good now because they approve of his plan of ceasing fire, but there's a catch. And that basically what Lawrence had to do to get them to agree to this was that they would do one more aerial bombing before they actually cease fire, and that Nick would be the one to order the strike. You can tell by the way Lawrence and Nick are looking at each other that there is a rift between them. Again, I'm talking about this leg up on each other, and there's like this pride thing going on, like who's really telling who what to do. And now Lawrence has more power because he's back on the council and because he got this blackmail from Lydia about the commander. So Nick can't really command him anymore. But it's Lawrence putting the ball back in Nick's court here to now make the next move and do what needs to be done. So this was a really nice surprise and exciting, like, oh my God, like what is Nick gonna do here? This is crazy because we know where these bombs are going, where Janine and June are. So speaking of Janine and June, let's go to their side of the episode before we get back to the whole aerial bombings. So already what's heartbreaking about how it opens up with June and Janine's story is that while June's laying down thinking of Luke, we see that Janine is sleeping with this creeper Steven from last episode who took advantage of her. Of course that character's name is Steven. Great. But we'll see with June's character here is her conflict is that she's used to being in charge, but this is all Steven's call. We learn what they do, and that she just wants to use these guns and fight, but that's not their approach to this camp. They're very reserved. But what I did like what they did with June's character here is that you see the next day she's washing her handmaid's outfit. She's holding onto it tight throughout the episode, which will eventually lead her to have it traded in. But it's interesting. It's like her not letting go of it and her time as a handmaid and how that's always going to stay with her too, which I like they're kind of opening that door like I was talking about with Rita when she got to Canada and really seeing how June's going to adjust. But I feel that same disgust June feels where you see Steven teaching Janine how to use a gun and he's all flirty with her and she's happy with him. It's like, you know what the real thing that's going on there is just sick and twisted on Steven's part. So June, when they run into a dead body they find of a soldier, she learns about the Nighthawks from Steven. So June likes the sound of the Nighthawks. They just kill soldiers. They are true rebels and they're fighters, and that's what she wants to do. Again, that's why I'm saying she's enamored with all these scenes where she's looking at the guns at the trade, at the one Steven's holding. She just wants to take these things and fight back. But, you know, what's interesting is it leads to this tense scene in this shop where the soldiers show up and they're hiding, and she's like mad at Steven because he's not just shooting at the soldier, but he's like, hey, what happens when they don't report back? More patrols, more soldiers. Unfortunately, I kind of agreed with Steven here. It's like, you know, June sometimes gets so chaotic and emotional in the way she fights that she doesn't take a beat sometimes to just think and realize that every action that seems the right in the moment may not be, and to kind of weigh all the options. And I think that actually makes more sense in what Steven was saying. But I do wonder, they gave so much time to June and looking at guns this episode, making a big point of it. There really wasn't a payoff about it this episode, though, so I don't know if they're setting up a story where she's going to learn to not be as, like, war hungry, let's say, or fighting, or if they're just a reminder and saying that they do have to fight, which kind of gets talked about here with her and Janine. But we'll get to that in a second. First, I want to talk about this scene where they're actually at the trade post. And there's important character moments, like this guy Brad just wants to be friends with June here. We don't really know his clear intentions, and like June, we're not trusting, right? And she just says to him she's not interested, but Janine's like, wow, sees like you're really making friends here. But it's the complete opposite of them, where Janine's very friendly, very trusting, open, and innocent, right? Where June just knows the reality of this world right now. She's very closed book, and it's shown in their costume design, which is really good, because Janine, you see, she's even got this new eye patch. Her whole color palette here is the same as that camp. She blends right in. She's fitting right in, where June's like just sticking out like a sore thumb with that yellow sweater and staying on the outs. So what was really interesting here, though, is when Janine finds this baseball cap that she wants to get for Steven, you know, in the screener, it has a Cubs logo on it. And of course, that's because Elisabeth Moss is a huge diehard Cubs fan. I'm wondering if in the episode itself, if you guys let me know in the comments, if it does have the Cubs logo, because in the trailers, all these scenes, there's no logo on the hat. So I don't know if that was something to do with they couldn't maybe have the logo in the trailers for certain royalty reasons. Who knows, but I am curious if they actually kept that in the episode. But it's pushing now June confronting Janine more and more about, like, I don't want this guy taking advantage of you. And Janine's always fighting back, like, look, it's consensual. I really like this guy. But at the end of the day, from an outsider's point of view, like, June's, you really know what the real deal is with this guy, Steven. I feel like we've all been there with a friend or a sibling where you see they're dating someone who is trouble and you can see what they're doing, with the person in it really can't. But you also have to find this line of, like, when do you back off? But like I'm talking about, going back to her having trouble letting go of this handmade cloak, but she does the right thing by giving hers in to make sure that Janine gets that hat that Janine we know really wants. And it's a nice gesture by June, but I really love they showed, even when the guy's putting the cloaks away, June looks at those cloaks and like flinches. So it's just interesting to see how her mind's going to adjust to not being a handmaid anymore. So where we really see the main conflict of this episode between June and Janine happen is at night when they talk, and June tells Janine she wants to just go, let's find these Nighthawks and fight. But Janine's like, no, I'm comfortable here. I want to have a child. We can be moms together. And she's just striving for a normal life here. And she's like, the world needs more American babies. And then June's like, you sound like Aunt Lydia. But Janine's like, no, you're like Aunt Lydia because you're bossy, you're judgmental. But again, June hammers home, which kind of got a little repetitive here writing-wise with her, again, saying to Janine, this guy's taking advantage of you. And Janine's like, no, it's consensual. Stop trying to make yourself feel better by helping me. And June's like, I don't want to see you get hurt. But Janine's like, maybe you should have thought that with Alma and Brianna. I think that was also repetitive. I think because we saw that last episode, pretty much almost word for word the same line and point made. So it kind of felt like they were just pulling back some old hits here. But June has the diss of the season when she says back, Kay, well, I'm leaving tomorrow. You can come with me or stay here and be, oh, Steven, sizzle, got him. But what this big fight leads to is a really great scene with Janine and June the next day when Janine informs June that she's going to stay. There's true love shown between these two characters that go way back, and it's with the lines that June says to Janine, baby is going to be lucky to have you. And Janine says back, well, these rebels are going to be lucky to have you. And I love Janine gives her the hat and says something to remember me by. Now, this has way more meaning because we know how this episode ends, which we'll get to, But June says, how can I forget you? Beautifully delivered by Elisabeth Moss. And Janine says, who can forget the girl with one eye? And the great line is when June says back, I think you're beautiful. Woo! There comes the waterworks for me. I thought I was going to go whole episode not crying, but it happened. Just again, props to Madeline Brewer and Elisabeth Moss. They are true, brilliant actresses, and they just kind of just worked off each other. You couldn't do it better in one scene. So June is in this big city, right? She's walking alone. I love seeing this new setting like I was talking about. I'm happy this season is going to these new locations, things people have wanted to see. And Janine's already back. This kind of felt a little rushed that she's already back after we just had that really good goodbye moment. And it's going to go into my issues with the end of this episode as we're getting into this. But she says, I feel we are safer together. Handmaids always walk in twos. Remember? Love that line. But this is where it gets crazy because you see these planes coming in from Nick's attack and the bombs. And it's right where June and Janine is. So this was insane. And June rolls over after getting hit by all this debris and grabs the hat. That, again, right now is going to symbolize Janine to her. But in this big moment at the end of the episode, I have 4 issues here. And it really hurts this episode as a whole for me because you want to stick the landing, right? No pun intended with the planes. So issue number 1. I didn't like the cover by Coldplay, Here to Fix You. Hell no. Just give me the regular version. And the problem, even if they give me the regular version, I don't think this song works for this moment. I just don't think the lyrics match up well. And having Moira come in, it just doesn't really click on me. And having the cover version is really tropey right now. You see it in so many trailers for movies and shows, and it's like the hipster Starbucks version of Coldplay. I don't want to hear it. I don't think it works. It's just kind of rolling your eyes a bit. My other issue here is that the moment June gets up and is screaming Janine, we are feeling that in that moment, just like June. And our number one concern in our mind is, where is Janine? So why this is an issue for me is because having Moira come in right at that moment makes me care less about her coming in because my head is on where is Janine. I can't fit in being like, oh my God, Moira's back. Like, it's cramming in 2 very important emotions that need their weight and time and answer. And it's fighting against each other because I should be feeling that feeling of like, oh, Moira's back. This is amazing. Best friends reunited. But I'm actually more worried at the moment about where is Janine. And I can't really care about that. My third complaint is, why on earth did the marketing team for the show decide to show in the trailers Moira in this exact moment finding June? Why would they do that? Because this is literally the midpoint of the season. We are at the end of episode 5. It's a 10-episode season. Why would you show that big reveal? It takes away so much from it. We knew this was going to happen. So there goes reveal for that. And it's not even like they threw it in teasers or little promos or clips that you might find deeper on the web. It was in the main trailer. And finally, I do not like they did not show us if Janine died or not. I know it's a business move. It's a classic cliffhanger shows do to be like, oh, we got to get everyone talking about is Janine alive or not for like a week. But I don't think this is a great move by the Handmaids, so I don't think they should get into that gimmicky area, and especially because if we're transitioning now to Moira being in the fold, we're also going to have to squeeze in an answer for Janine. That's going to stay on people's minds, so they better give us an answer at least at the beginning of next episode, or it's not going to leave us. It's too big of a character. You can't not tell us, and it hurts the emotion of the scene because you're like, am I crying or am I not crying? Because I don't really know if Janine's dead or not. And this whole episode, was written as an episode of a character dying, so I'm going to guess that she's going to pass away, but I don't know if she's dead or not, and that's frustrating, and I think we should know right here to get the payoff for the episode. And it's weird because it's trying to transition out now from June's story to now going towards Canada, but you can't leave that big hook. I just don't agree with it. And I didn't want to say this yet, but now I'm actually feeling it where I did like the pace at the beginning of the season, moving location and getting on with things, not feeling filler episodes, but I did feel this episode was rushed, and I would have liked a little more time with Janine and June, maybe split up, or if we're going to rush Janine coming back, maybe just a little more time with Janine and June on the run. Like, I don't think that was something you should just jump out of. I think we finally got somewhere where they're doing their own thing. We're in this new location. It could have been, I think, a little more interesting, but now it's kind of like, all right, we're taking June, and now we're going to Canada. And I can't put my finger on here. It's just how I feel. I don't even know if this is justified saying, but this episode for some reason felt hollow, and I think it's because I'm not buying Aunt Lydia being capable of a redemption arc yet, and it's a shorter episode, right? I think it's only like 43 minutes, so it's going to add to that rush feeling, and it's stuff that I think they kind of should have taken a little more time with, and it's not as tight as previous episodes. That's thematically, and this episode is more telly than showy in the past episodes, where it's a lot of dialogue heavy and kind of just saying what you need to hear, where you can literally look at the conflict between Janine and June last episode, and it was way better how they did it, where it was a lot of showing, and you felt it through visual language, right? And a little bit of dialogue telling you, but this was a lot of just like on-the-nose writing, pulling some beats we already saw from last episode with their fighting. So I wasn't as crazy about this episode, but I still think it was a really good episode, because it's still Handmaid's Tale, still quality. I still enjoyed it in the season as a whole, but I do have some serious gripes this episode that I didn't have with other ones. So I'm actually going to give this one still an 8.5, because if it just stuck the landing here and went away from my heavy criticism of that final scene that you really need to hit in a big episode to make it all kind of come together, especially with an important character like Janine. And I'm worried that, I hope to God they didn't kill Janine, because she's a big character, and she's also like arguably maybe the most popular character on the show. I think she is. Maybe write down below, let's hear your thoughts. Let's have that debate. Who is the most popular character? Not who you like the best. Who do you think is the most loved by fans? And I'm going to actually say it's Janine. So does that help the show when they kill that character? It never does. So I hope they didn't, but we'll see. Let me know what you thought of this episode down below. I love to hear your thoughts. I read every comment. I try to respond to as many as I can. I've done a bunch of interviews with the cast about the season, so check out the links down below. It will be the top comment I pin. You don't want to miss those. Please follow me at Steve Varley Show on Twitter and Instagram for more of me. And if you really like what I do here, I'd really appreciate if you could sign up for my PayPal link. It's in my description. It's $2 a month. It will help me do this full time one day and make more videos for you guys. Help me live my dream. I'd really appreciate that. And if not, again, like I said, if you just subscribe to the channel, that helps in so many ways you have no idea. And praise be. And I'll see you next week.